Right. I'm having a wonderful chat with, as I say, really, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to meet so many brilliant musicians. And you are certainly a brilliant musician. I'm speaking with the Italian
Thank you.
Milanese pianist Adalberto Maria Riva. We are discussing today very, very interesting, and I feel so happy that I am not stupid. Uh, your 2019 Toccata Classics CD release, the piano music of Émile Jaques-Dalcroze, Volume
Yeah.
1. Okay, and
Yes.
I thought to myself, who is this Émile Jaques-Dalcroze?
That,
We'll find out soon enough. Amazing. It is this first CD is kind of as we discussed, kind of salon music for piano. Um, it,
yes.
I think is okay just as a generalization, and it's a teaser because we are
Yes.
really in about the years 1894, 1896. This man lived from 1865 to 1950. You have just
50.
scraped the surface, I have a feeling. Okay, just a quick one, and then I'll let you speak, Adalberto.
Okay.
Let me find this. Just a quick one about who you are for my audience. As I said, Milanese pianist that sounded like mayonnaise from Milano, pianist
Mhm.
Adalberto Maria Riva. You've won, as you know, many international and national prizes. Graduate in your youth of the Lycée Berchet in Milan, and we're going to have I hope, fun little conversation about that time in your life. Um, 2001, the Virtuosity Certificate from the Conservatoire de Lausanne. You've been a concert soloist, recitalist, many, many countries all over Europe, of course. Um, Now, do I understand you live now in Freiburg,
Yes.
but you are at your folks' home in Milano or
Not in
somewhere?
Milano, in a small village in the countrysides, but
Oh, how
yes, yes.
sweet. And everybody, his birthday's coming up. Remember, a couple days. I don't know. Throw congratulations out on Facebook to
Thank you. This is a
Adalberto.
very big gift for birthday interview with you.
I'm going to do a quick overview about this amazing Swiss composer, Émile Jacques-Dalcroze.
Mhm.
Again, 1865, 1950, and we discussed earlier, I am fascinated by human beings who straddle two centuries. This man didn't have a taste of the 19th century. He was in his 20s and 30s in the 19th century. I mean, pre-electricity,
Yeah.
pre-automobile, and he lived to 1950. He saw all the best and all the worst of the 20th century as well. So
Yeah.
this man, fascinating Swiss composer, born in Vienna, as I
Yes.
understand, yeah, um, and is most famous for this method of teaching music, especially to young people, eurythmics. Which,
Mhm.
by the way, we'll sort of touch on it because I know that you're not an expert in eurythmics, but it's interesting how you've maybe found something through looking at his
Yes,
piano music.
there are links to the early works, and he developed all this story about eurythmics because he was a professor of solfège at the Geneva Conservatory, and he was uh, very upset to see how his student didn't have a corporal idea of rhythm. So it was the teaching was very intellectual and rhythm is so physical. So he started to think how it was possible to connect movement to the theory about rhythm, and this is how eurythmics develops later.
And by the way, you'll have to stop moving your knees.
Yeah.
you, Adalberto is doing heroic work as so many do for me, and his laptop is being straddled on his knees, and so you must remember not to get too enthusiastic with the knees. You tend to bounce a bit. Why don't we just go back in time a little bit? Backstory is what I love. Let's just talk about your youth, your father, the
Yeah.
influences of your family and teachers, and then when did that huge creature, that piano, come up into your life and say, I'm it, you're me?
Oh, well, my parents play piano. So we
Nice.
had an upright piano at home, and my father was a very, very good amateur pianist. So I grew up with music at home, and then, well, my father was now he's retired, but he was professor of Latin and Greek in a very famous lycée in Milan, where I was born and where I grew up. And I went to the same school, not in the same class, but to the same school where my father was teaching. And when I was, I think, 13 or 14 years old, I decided I would like to be a pianist in my life. And I don't know if it is a good choice, but I did some recordings, and I'm trying to do my own careers. The fact that we are speaking together, maybe it was a good choice.
Well, it's a good choice because joy and happiness and a sense of fulfillment and intellectual satisfaction, that's the most important thing, as I'm sure your father would tell you as well. So for all of us, it's a hard life. The arts,
Yes, it's very hard, not
it's hard.
very hard life.
Okay,
If
very
you
hard
would
life.
like to earn money, I mean to live
Yeah.
with music.
And
Yeah.
excuse me, my nose is running just a bit, but yeah, so we all know it's a struggle, but that's why I always ask, because it is a deliberate uh, determination. I almost said masochistic determination. That's I'm being silly, but the point is, it's a very hard career, very difficult, and I salute you for it.
You
And
are not completely silly. I think it's something right
oh, thank you.
about masochistic.
That was too much. That was too extreme. I know. I'm a Yankee. I do use extreme words, I suppose.
Yeah.
So now just to finish that one that idea out. So Émile Jaques-Dalcroze is really most famous for this wonderful method of eurythmics, and what we're talking about is body motion to music, to sound
Yes.
and rhythm and body, how important that is. And just a brief one, how many minutes have we got? I can squeak this one in. I am now absolutely in my old age convinced that orchestras, big orchestras even, should stand, period,
Ah.
for that
Oh.
very reason. And I saw Romeo and Juliet, the Prokofiev ballet. I saw I've forgotten, a European orchestra. All of this, with the exception, of course, of cello, but all of the string, this, are standing. And talk about eurythmics. They have no
Yes.
choice. The whole, especially the lower torso, becomes part of the instrument. Just stunning the way the sound just leaps out. As a result of that, of Dalcroze's very important idea that body movement and music and rhythm are all one and the same thing, and you have to nurture all of it. If I can capsulize what
Yes.
eurythmics are. Now, did you, we've discussed your parents being musicians. That's always wonderful. And choosing at about 13, that's just about right, I think. When we make these very serious decisions, I decided I was going to be a conductor at about 15.
Yeah.
So then what? I mean, when did you begin studying? Where did you go? I mentioned the conservatories, but how? Not to take forever, but just a little overview. How you went about? Did you go searching for teachers? Did they search for you? That kind of thing.
Well, I was studying I started with in conservatory in Milan, my city, and where I did all the academic uh, degrees. And then when I finished, I was 19 years old, and then I was looking for something else. So I went for 2 or 3 years in Imola, near Bologna. There was a very famous, at the time in the 90s, there was a very famous Accademia Internazionale Incontri col Maestro, where a lot of young pianists from all over Italy came to have master class and to grow to the Conservatory of Lausanne, where I met a pianist who was my teacher for 2 years, Daga Schatz, and he's from Sweden, and he was working very much about piano transcriptions. He did a piano transcription about Leonard Bernstein West Side Story for only one piano, and then he did also other things with the Japanese colleague, and he was a very open-minded person. So he he put me in contact with other friends, colleagues of him, and I had the opportunity to discuss about different point of view and different piano schools, which was very important for me at that age. I was 24, 25 years old, so I started to go to international piano competition, and then I I met very good friends in Switzerland, and so this is why I started to build up very good relationship with Swiss people, and this is why 2 years ago I moved from Italy to Switzerland, where I work as a soloist and accompanist, and I mean a freelancer musician, which was unluckily not possible to do in my country.
That's probably an entire other
Yes.
interview. Uh, but I like it. By the way, we had a moment, and it happens now and again when things freeze up or shut down for a little bit. It's just we're only 6,000 miles away from each other. You know, it happens, but we're fine.
Yeah.
But what interests me, possibly, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but you have some kind of affinity for the Swiss, and then
Oh,
Dalcroze comes into your life. Yeah.
yes, and it was very, very funny how Dalcroze came into my life because, of course, I knew that Émile Jaques-Dalcroze wrote this method, Eurythmics, but I didn't know anything at all about except the name and Eurythmics, and it is at that time when I started to make some search about Swiss music, except that but there is something connected to body and music and movement, but what is exactly in the detail I discover much more later. And so I was at that time, because the Swiss radio was I had several interviews regularly with them, and once we went to the Gruyère Castle, which is a very famous place, touristic place in Switzerland. And in this castle, there is a piano, historical piano, 1835, where probably Franz Liszt played when he was in Switzerland with
Mm-hmm.
Marie Dagoult. And so the director of the castle at the time says, okay, we have this instrument. We know that the property of the castle in the 19th century was belonging to a very important family from Geneva. And one member of this family was Charles Beauvilliers-Berg, which was a pupil of Chopin. So this man asked me if I can search about more music about Charles Beauvilliers-Berg in the Geneva library of the conservatory. I went there and I met the director of the library, who became a very good friend of mine later, and he is now the artistic director of this Dalcroze project. And he said to me, but why you are at that time, so I'm speaking about 2011, and he said, but why you are searching only for Beauvilliers-Berg? There are a lot of other Swiss composer and even more interesting. Okay, so I said, Mr. Jacques, his name is Jacques Chamkerten, with Émile Jaques-Dalcroze. I don't know anything at all, so I think if you have a list of composer that you think that could be interesting to make a search, please let me know, and I will go on. And so after 10 minutes, he went out from his office with a long list like this, and in the list there was the name of Jacques Dalcroze. Yeah, he said, okay, I know that Jacques Dalcroze is a teacher, but I didn't know that he's also a composer. So I started to search music, and I was really fascinating when I started to sight read, because nothing is recorded. It was, now we did a recording, but before nothing is recorded about Dalcroze composition. And Dalcroze didn't compose only for piano, 4 operas, big symphonic works, a lot of songs for children, but also for melodies, which is songs for voice and piano. This is the French term for this
Leader,
kind of
I mean,
things.
yeah.
Yes, leader, yeah. And well, chamber
Or chanson.
music,
Ah, you know, you
yeah.
took that question right out of my mind because I, of course, one of my questions was going to be now, what else did this man compose, and was he more regularly performed as, say, an opera composer? I mean, did he have a career, or was he rather relatively obscure? Do you have any idea?
Well, he before he started to wrote the method, he was a very well-known composer. Um, his opera has a big success.
Ah,
And, and in between end of 19 and beginning of 20th century. And and then when he started, he was a teacher of solfège, which is music theory, at the Geneva Conservatory of Music, and he was absolutely shocked at that time by the way his student didn't have a connection, a physical connection between the theory about the rhythm and the body. So all rhythm is something which is very, very physical,
yes.
and the system of the training system at that time, which I don't think is very changed very much today in the classical training. I had a classical training, so I am not a eurythmics. Uh, I didn't know I didn't have a eurythmic training. I am a classical pianist, so
But do you practice eurythmics? You understand? Are you a physically involved pianist? I'm sure you are.
you need you need,
Bingo.
especially when you play Jacques Dalcroze. But I mean, he was really shocked how his students didn't connect the theoretical aspect of music with the physical. So he started to think how it could be possible to link those two aspects of music, and this is why he started to develop this method, which is very much related to improvisation and movement. So body movements have their music, and a certain kind of music could suggest a kind of movement. And then the things are much more complicated because he developed an institute in Hellerau, Germany, close to Dresden, in 1911, where, for instance, you know the Rite of Springs by Stravinsky, the choreography was built by a teacher of Dalcroze who went to the Ballet Russe and tried to
Mm.
show those which was absolutely fascinating at that time. We are speaking at the beginning of the 20th century, and for us today, connecting music and movement is quite normal. But 100 years ago was absolutely fascinating and revolutionary.
Of course, because
So
we are looking at the latter part of the last hang on of the Victorian age, which was very proper, very
yeah,
concealed.
and in Geneva Conservatory, when Dalcroze started to make with his students some exercises to try to connect better the movement with the music and the body, and you know, Geneva was a very strict society, and the conservatory kicked Dalcroze out because this freedom, and especially with girls dancing without shoes at that time, was
Horrifying.
absolutely unbelievable. So please,
Amazing.
Monsieur Jacques, this is the door, the way to the door. And so then he went to Dresden, and there he built up this big institute in Hellerau. And after, when there was the First World War, he was in at that time when the war exploded. He was again in Switzerland, so he was blocked in Switzerland. He could not come back to Germany, and this is why in 1915 Geneva built up the Émile Jaques-Dalcroze Institute, which is existing today.
Interesting.
And with,
Interesting. Also, I
yeah,
remember reading that later the Nazis, in other words, World War II, shut down another of his institutes or something. So there's he had thanks for telling me this. He was plagued with failure in many ways for one
yeah,
of the most revolutionary ideas in all of music.
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
And
That
the idea of Dalcroze for Eurythmic is very, very easy and simple, and you have a lot of freedom because everything is possible. And in what is when I went for a first time to a Eurythmic class after several years that I met Jacques Dalcroze through his music, through his composition, which is an aspect which is not very well known even in the Dalcroze community. So those pieces of music are really very, very unusual. And
can I just jump in here because I want to try and get focused
yeah,
on something since we're very close. What I want to know is, in preparing his piano, this first sampling of his piano music that you're giving to the world, did you find, without realizing it, I'm talking about, were these exercises for his students? Are these written in some way that demand more motor action or more bodily involvement? You see what I mean? If that makes any sense.
well, the question is good, but the answer should be long because, well, first of all, Dalcroze never quit piano in all his life because Eurythmics is about you should play piano, you should improvise, and piano is the instrument which is always there when you teach Eurythmics. So first, we can this project of recording by Dalcroze is about 3 CDs. My CDs is the first one, who is about the early works.
I see.
So before the method. Then we have
Interesting.
then we have another one, which is with a colleague of mine, Paolo Munao from Italy, and he's about the period between 1910 and 20. And then we have a third one with 2 pianists who are working at the Dalcroze Institute in Geneva, and this is the last works starting from 1920 to the end of his life. In the second part, I mean, after the Eurythmics, let's say after 1915, after World War I, you see a lot of title coming from dance, rythme de danse, chanson pour danser. Also, jazz was influencing his music. So at the very beginning, he was born in Vienna. He studied in Geneva, and then he went back to Vienna to study with Bruckner, and then to Paris.
That explains a lot about this album. There are some just gloriously romantic sounds.
Yes, the very beginning of his style is this late romantic German and French. French is something like Fauré, Massenet, Chabrier, which is not the Debussy and Ravel. It's quite different, and you find these harmonic patterns very chromatic and sometimes ambiguous, which we find also in Dalcroze music. And from the German part, he studied with Bruckner, this long phrasing and chromatic harmony, which we don't find in the pieces written after 1910-15.
So he changes really completely. He outgrows the late romanticism that speaks to this first CD, which is the end of
the first
romantic
CD is absolutely late romantic style and with very original harmonic choice.
Speak to that just briefly if you can, because here's my impression for everybody to know as I was listening. Now remember, now we're getting in better focus. Student of Bruckner. This first CD is late romantic, roughly 1896, you know what I mean, that period. Salon music, wonderful salon music, apparently very difficult as well, yeah?
Yes, it was he was a fantastic pianist because it's really very well written for the piano. You have inner voices and big extension, but everything fits very comfortable, even when it's complicated. And this is really he mastered the way to write music for the piano. But so he was a great pianist, but not only that, he was a great composer, because you have line and you have something which is absolutely original. You see that is okay, late romantic style, but it's not Bruckner, it's not Brahms, it's not French. After 3 or 4 measure, it is Dalcroze.
And just to speak to again these harmonic, interesting harmonic idiosyncrasies or innovations of his. As I listen to these again, describing late 19th century, we've talked about Bruckner and all that, he will do the most fascinating little harmonic twists, or even venture out on a limb for a couple of bars and then come back into the comforts of, and your mind, your brain, your intellect is just kind of like given a zap. Am I anywhere close? Speak to that about his unique harmonic movement. I mean, it's very simple.
Absolutely. I mean, the harmonic patterns by Dalcroze, it's something very complicated but fascinating. It's just 2 measure, completely different word, and then back.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad I got that, because it just blew my brains out. So fascinating.
There is a piece. The last piece of this recording, whose title is Polka and Harmonique, which is polka and harmonic, and this is something where you are always modulating and changing keys, and it is also it's a salon piece. This in like Strauss,
and still French influenced. Yeah, French Germanic influence.
Yes,
still, yeah.
You have a big freedom. You should have a big freedom, but you should play this music, which is very complex and very difficult from the technical point of view, especially this piece, with a lot of very, very light, and like you are joking. It's very, very charming, but it's difficult to be charming when you have very big technical stuff to do at the same time.
This is his Opus 47, and I love the way you organize the CD. We're looking at whatever Opus 45 to 47 or something. I mean, very tight range, and even just a couple of years of his output. That's so fascinating. But in my notes about the polka and harmonique, I see he wants to be in the 20th century. Lots and lots of interesting harmonic movement. Yeah.
And then after, I mean, the other pieces which are not.
Excuse me for interrupting, but he just, then the next stuff, we're going to be surprised and shocked at how the change. Go.
No. I mean, the after that, you have in the very lot changing of meters, which is influenced by his search on rhythm. So it's completely different style.
I wasn't hearing that there are meter changes a lot.
No. In this music, no. The rhythm is very, very strict. But in the next pieces, I mean, the second and the third CD is completely different style. So he was really changing, and it's difficult to separate his production as a composer and his production as a teacher. I think both are the both sides of the same personality as an artist.
Yeah, which is good for both. Yeah. In other words, if he's a good teacher, he's going to be expressing that teaching in his music.
Even in those early works, you feel this freedom and this. He's looking for something. The form, the musical form is very easy. Very often is A, B, A, which is the easiest. But you have modulation, you have harmonic, you have the impression that he's quite improvising for himself. And improvisation is one of the basic things in your rhythmic training.
Well, but this has really been clear, has helped me to be much clearer, and it makes this whole series that you just described of 3 CDs, including the first, so much more interesting. And again, I think I mentioned to you before we began, from the very beginning, I kept seeing his years and kept wondering what does his music sound like in 1948 or after the wars? I mean, after this teaser from the late 19th century.
Yeah.
What an amazing and fascinating composer. So you have discovered inadvertently a really
Well,
major artist. Yeah.
yes, well, it's not me. Thanks to good friends, and
Yeah.
first of all, Jacques Chankerten, who is the director of the Geneva Conservatory Library, and who wrote the first catalog about Dalcroze songs.
Aha.
Because there is no catalog about the instrumental music, nothing at all. You should go to the library and search.
Aha.
So he knows very well all because he make a lot of search in this field, and I had chance to work with him, and so he gave me very good suggestions. And then I met the family also with Martine, with the la petite fille, c'est the nephew of, of Jacques Dalcroze, who was born the same year when Jacques Dalcroze died, but they never met because Dalcroze, the composer, died some month before Martine was born. And so we work all together, and we build up this project. It's a big work because we are 2 or 3 years working to have this CD ready, but we feel that there is a lot of interest about this music, not only in the Dalcroze community, because it's an aspect mostly unknown about this.
I was going to use the word fresh. This is fresh repertoire. I'm so glad that for a while I was wondering if I was the idiot in the room about who is this Dalcroze guy. But let me touch on a couple of things. First, you tell me that Dalcroze's son was born in 1950, roughly.
Dalcroze, no son, the son of the sun.
Okay, I feel better now.
The daughter of the sun.
I thought that there's a very
sorry.
active composer, all right, to have a child at that age. Thank you for straightening that out. What else? There was something else. We discussed the harmony and so on. I can't remember what the other part of the question I was going to ask in terms of just spontaneous question from this conversation, but it has been, you have really clarified a great deal, and I think what everybody knows, we're going to put the video up at performingartsreview.net with the interview. I'll have all the goodies for people to go buy the CD, but again, this is very interesting and very important repertoire. It's no dummies music. It's hard work for a professional pianist. In other words, it's a challenge. It's not silly stuff at all. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's very good music. I mean, clever and very well written and interesting. You have each measure, you have something to do.
Something is going on. Yeah. Anyway, let me just. And what I was remembering is you have made it very clear about the second phase coming up. All I had to hear was 1911 in your explanation, Stravinsky, Rite of Spring, and how through connections or whatever, people who knew one another, that he was part of that, and all I have to do is remember the tremendous rhythmic movement in Rite of Spring. So that's going to be the second CD where he really plunges into various meters, playing and experimenting with various meters, if I understand you, and so on.
Yes.
And it also makes me wonder what training under Bruckner, what are those operas? What are the big symphonic works? In terms of his orchestration, because even the piano music is beautifully orchestrated. If you get my drift, the construction, the structure is so good. And one last good credit, it's going to be to your engineer. We spoke before. Give me his name again, and then.
His name is Claude Maréchaux, and he's an independent in Switzerland, and he did something like 1,500 recordings. So. He has very good ears.
And you described it's a very simple process, hanging one mic, to record. But it's a whole lot more than that, obviously, back there at the control desk, because as I told you earlier, when I'm not, I'm not an acoustician. I'm just a musician. But when you can hear instantly when the sound is consistent track to track, very, very
Yeah.
important, even over a couple of days of recording. I mean, just the airflow from one day to the next can change everything. But the clean quality of his capture of the
Yeah, well,
instrument.
we had the chance to have a very good, one of the best recording studio in Geneva, because the Swiss radio was a partner of this project.
That
So
helps.
we had the Studio Ansermet, which is a very well known place in Geneva, but so the acoustic was a big hall, and the Claude Maréchaux, he put only, well, two microphone, two between 2 and 3 meters on out of the piano, so it was the position where you generally hear the instrument. You can the most natural position as possible, and so if you have a good ear and you can understand where, because this the secret is where to put
Yes,
the
absolutely.
microphone.
Well, it's an
That,
absolutely gorgeous recording. We're going to run it down here, end it now. Wonderful pianist Adalberto Maria Riva. Uh,
thank you.
we're talking about his 2019, I think it came out in January, Toccata Classics. This will all be up at Performing Arts Review, folks. It'll be real easy to buy this CD, pianists everywhere. It's Volume 1, the piano music of Émile Jaques-Dalcroze. We've had a wonderful, very enlightening discussion, I think, about this man, about the position of this CD, of his early piano music, his, shall we say, salon music. It's not quite right, but they're little bits and pieces, little lovely things, little arabesques, little romances. So
Yeah, it's what was called morceau de genre in French. So it's, yes, salon music, short pieces with an atmosphere,
yeah.
and but each piece has its own character, and this is really nothing is banal, nothing is general.
Mhm.
Every note has its own place, and it's wonderful music, and is very well written for the piano also.
Uh,
So
does Emile ever visit you late at night in your dreams? Because you are an advocate.
maybe not yet.
Advertisement. Adalberto, many, many thanks for a wonderful evening. I'm sure it's getting very late where you are in Italy. Thanks again, and
Thank you to you for the
wonderful, wonderful
invitation.
chat. And also thank you for introducing all of us to this very, very important composer. All
Thank
right,
you. Thank you.
right on.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.